Good morning, Year 5. I hope you're well. Right, better get on to Chapter 10, Beetle Mountain. That's the window. Darkus pointed up through the branches of the sycamore tree. We need to climb up to the branch opposite and jump in. He looked at his shoulder. Baxter, can you fly up? I'm not sure about this. Bertolt clutched Virginia. I'm not very good with heights. Don't you want to see? Bertolt nodded reluctantly. Yes, but what's the worst that could happen? We get in there and it turns out there are only a handful of ordinary beetles in a teacup? No, Bertolt looked sombre. We fall and break our necks or get caught and end up in prison. If we get caught, we'll tell the police we were trying to rescue Darkus. They kidnapped him, remember? We'll be heroes. What if we get kidnapped? Look, they're out, and if they come back, we can be out of the window and down here in seconds. Darkus reassured him, swinging up into the tree and leaning back down to offer Virginia a helping hand. She scoffed at him, wrapping her hands around the lowest branch and walking her feet up the trunk until she could flip into a sitting position beside him. They looked down at Bertolt, who was jumping up and down, trying and failing to reach the branch. Virginia and Darkus both leant down, each grabbing hold of one of his hands, and pulled him up beside them. Thanks. Bertolt pushed his glasses up his nose and gave them an apologetic smile. Darkus went ahead, climbing up the branch opposite Humphrey's room, and launched his body in through the window. The beetles were hidden away inside their mountain, with only the odd hind leg or antenna visible, and he was relieved to see the pink armchair was still wedged against the door. Hello, Darkus whispered, picking himself up off the floor. I'm back. Baxter landed gently on his shoulder. He could hear quiet scufflings and chitterings as the other beetles began emerging from their mountain. Move over. Virginia was crouching on the window ledge. This window is swarming with ladybirds. I might just stay here. Bertolt was still clinging onto the branch. Come on. Virginia reached out and Bertolt hurled himself into her arms, knocking them both through the window onto the floor. Sorry, Bertolt whispered. I'm at a height disadvantage when it comes to trees. It's dark in here. Virginia looked about. There isn't a light, Darkus replied, pointing up at the bulbous fitting hanging from the ceiling. I wish I'd brought my torch. A gentle buzzing noise answered him, and thousands of tiny flickering yellow lights floated up to the ceiling. Wow! Darkus looked up. Peony Wallies, Virginia gasped even. Peony what? Darkus asked. Fireflies, Virginia said, her eyes shining. Our very own starlight. Fireflies, Bertolt echoed. Now they're beautiful. Welcome to Beetle Mountain. Darkus proudly stepped over to the towering mound, enjoying the expressions on Virginia's and Bertolt's faces as hundreds of beetles poked their heads out of their cups. Baxter flew up and landed on the butterfly bush. Those are big beetles. Virginia moved to take a closer look. Freeze, Darkus pointed. Look down. The floor in front of her feet might have looked like carpet, but it was, Darkus knew, a live tapestry of beetles weaving in and out of each other. What do I do? She asked Darkus. Darkus knelt down. Please can you let my friend through? He asked politely. The beetles at Virginia's feet drew back, parting to create a path. Amazing, she laughed with delight, stepping up gingerly beside him. Darkus pointed out the beetles in the cups, discovering that some of them housed beetle larvae too. They spotted traces of cranberry sauce in several cups and was mesmerised by the turquoise and caramel mould growth springing up between the various pieces of crockery. He resisted the urge to poke them, but noticed that different types of beetle furnished their cups with different things, like twigs or water or even an old sock. My brother Sean's going to die when I tell him about this, Virginia said, peering into the cups. Look, an elderberry beetle. She pointed at a black beetle with absurdly long antennae and elytra that had a rim of bright gold. They're a seriously endangered species. Oh, and there's a stag beetle and an oil beetle. This room should be a conservation zone. Guys, Bertolt's voice had shot up an octave. Help, he squeaked. Relax, we'll hear the front door if they come back, Darkus said. No, look. Bertolt rolled his eyes up to the ceiling. Beetle. I know, Virginia smiled at the fireflies. Aren't they stunning? No, Bertolt wailed. On my head. Wowzers, what is that? Virginia exclaimed. It's enormous. Is it? Bertolt looked like he might faint. Resting on his white blonde curls was an enormous zebra-striped beetle. It's all right, Darkus smiled. It's a Goliath. I met him yesterday. He won't hurt you. Get it off me, Bertolt pleaded. Gently, Darkus held his hand against Bertolt's forehead and the huge beetle crawled onto it. Bertolt slumped against the wall with his eyes closed, sighing with relief until he opened them again and found a cluster of mint-green lavender beetles feeding off a tea splatter right in front of his nose. He sprang back with a shriek. Virginia tutted. "Stop being so jumpy or you'll squash someone. Come on, surely you're smart enough to see how amazing these guys are." Bertolt looked down, shamefaced. "Sorry." "Oh, look, dung beetles," Virginia pointed. "Oh, no, yuck," Bertolt grimaced. "Look what they're pushing." Darcus saw a brown cricket ball roll out of a hole in the skirting board, steered by two bronze beetles. One beetle was working heroically hard, walking in a kind of handstand and pushing the ball with his hind legs, whilst the other was pretending to help, but really sitting on top and getting a free ride. "Do you think it's human poo?" Bertolt asked. "What other kind of poo do you think they've got around here?" Virginia chuckled at Bertolt's horror. "Oh, come on, we all do it, and if beetles didn't get rid of it, we'd probably all be wading around in it." She looked around the room, taking in the dirty armchair, the axe, and the wooden chair with ropes wound around its legs. "Everything you said was true," she said to Darcus. "I thought you said you believed me." "I did, sort of." She shook her head in wonder. "But this is bonkers." "I know," he nodded. "These beetles are like no beetles I've ever seen before." He gently placed the Goliath beetle on the mountain. "And they need our help. They're in danger." Baxter dropped down from the butterfly bush and crawled to the Goliath beetle, his antennae flicking in silent conversation. "But," Virginia shook her head, "beetles don't have a hive mentality. They don't behave the way you're talking about, working together." "Well, maybe these ones do." He looked at his friends. "Something important is happening in this room. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know we have to protect these beetles. It's what Dad would do." "Are you going to tell your uncle about this place?" Bertolt asked. "I don't know." Darcus frowned. "Not yet." "I think you should," Bertolt said quietly. A loud bang sounded downstairs and they looked at each other in alarm. Blood-curdling laughter echoed up the stairwell. "What do you look like?" Humphrey roared. "Me?" Pickering snapped. "Take a look in the mirror and you'll see that satin highlights your talent for sweating like a warthog." "Your tie looks like a monkey spewed bananas on it," Humphrey snorted. The cousins were back. Goosebumps popped up all over Darcus's body. "Time to get out of here," he whispered urgently. "We don't want to get caught." He held his hand out to Baxter, who flew straight to it. They ran to the window. Virginia clambered onto the window ledge, leaning out and catching hold of the branch. She swung down and dropped to the ground. "What if I can't reach?" Bertolt clung to the window frame in fear. "You'll be fine," Darcus said. "Just give yourself a good push-off." Bertolt screwed up his courage, closed his eyes and flung himself off the window ledge with his arms thrown wide like a flying squirrel. He overshot the first branch, screaming as he hit the second, grabbing onto it for dear life. Virginia was up the tree in a shot, grabbing onto Bertolt and helping him down to the ground. "Back to base camp," she pushed him. "Quick! Hey! You made a noise like an air siren just now, so get on your knees and get under that table fast before we're seen." Bertolt crawled out into the tunnel. A firefly appeared before him, lighting the way. Darcus was shimmying down the tree, Baxter on his shoulder, when a window opened one floor down from Beetle Mountain. The cousins were in the kitchen. He froze. Pickering's head poked out. "I definitely heard something." "No, you didn't," came Humphrey's voice. "Yes, I did." Pickering scanned the yard. "There's someone out there." Darcus held his breath. "Don't look up." "It was probably a fox." Humphrey's head popped out of the window beside Pickering's. "Can't see anything except a yard full of rubbish." "It's not rubbish," Pickering shouted, slamming the window shut. Darcus dropped to the ground and crawled as fast as he could into Furniture Forest. Bertolt and Virginia were waiting for him just inside. "Come on, let's get back to base camp," he said. "Wait, where does that door go?" Virginia pointed to a shabby wooden door on the other side of the tree, partly obscured by a stack of furniture. "I don't know," Darcus admitted out of breath. "I've never noticed it before. Could be a way into the boarded-up shop." "Then we don't want to go through it." Bertolt looked at Darcus, clearly hoping he'd agree. "Do we? Because we'd be in their building, and they're back home now." "It's probably locked," said Darcus. "Might not be." Virginia cocked her head. "If we're going to protect these beetles, we need to identify all possible escape routes out of the building in case Lucretia Cutter shows up." Darcus nodded. "OK, let's take a look." Before anyone could protest, he was dashing back across the yard, Baxter still on his shoulder. When he reached the door, he twisted the door handle and pulled. The swollen wood popped out of the door frame with a grunt. Darcus held his thumbs up and slipped inside. Bertolt groaned as Darcus disappeared. "You stay here," Virginia said, wriggling past him. "Be our lookout." "OK." Bertolt said, looking relieved. If you see them coming, create a diversion so we can get out. Virginia peeked out from under the table. Wait, Bertolt blinked frantically. What kind of diversion? Do something noisy, she pointed. Push that stack of chairs over, and she launched herself after Darkus. Bertolt looked up at the firefly hovering above his head. I'm the lookout, he said. Virginia found herself standing on a black and white checked linoleum floor at the entrance to a dingy kitchenette. To her right was a neglected toilet. In the floor in front of it was a manhole cover. Wonder if that goes down to the sewers, she thought, remembering the dung beetles. She stepped over the manhole cover into the kitchen. A Belfast sink sat below a dark window, the light blocked by furniture outside. Opposite was a built-in cupboard with a threadbare floral apron hanging from the hook on the door. Darkus, she called out in a whisper. Where are you? Here. His voice came from an archway to the left. Come and look at this. He was in the middle of the shop floor, surrounded by a mess of sewing machine parts. A powder blue sign, Fanny Fluter's Knitting and Stitching Emporium, lay beside a shattered display case that held a cobweb-covered ball of yellow wool. On the wall behind the till, in enormous dripping red letters, was the word pies. Scrawled underneath it in spidery black marker were the words, make you fat. There was evidence of insect life everywhere. Chair legs had been eaten away until they looked like burnt matchsticks. Dark exoskeletons scurried in and out of nooks and crannies, glistening in the half-light as they trundled about their business. Darkus looked past Virginia. Where's Bertolt? Being our lookout, we don't want to get caught in here. Darkus nodded. If we could get that open, he pointed to the shop door, we'd have an escape route into the street. He went over to the door, pulled back the bolts and tried it, but it was locked. Don't suppose you can pick locks? She shook her head. Darkus rose up on tiptoe and ran his fingers along the top of the door frame. He stopped and grinned, pulling a key out of dust and cobwebs. Dad keeps a spare key above the door for forgetful days, he said, slotting the dusty key into the lock and turning it. The lock opened. Yes, he whispered, yanking the door open an inch, stopping it before it hit the gold bell hanging from the ceiling. Virginia held up her hand to give him a high five. It took an awkward second before Darkus realised what she was doing and lifted his own hand to meet hers. Closing and locking the door, he pocketed the key and followed Virginia back into the kitchen. Opening the cupboard with the apron on the door, she whispered at him, Look at this. Inside was a staircase. Leaning their heads into the stairwell, they heard Pickering and Humphrey's voices. It leads up to their kitchen, Virginia mouthed. You've forgotten something. Pickering's voice was dripping with acid. We can't get your door open, and unless I'm mistaken, there's a boy tied up and gagged in there. I wonder what the police would say if someone told them about that. But you did it. Ah, but he's in your room, and he'll remember you wanting to bake him into a pie. I'm sure the police would be interested. That's murder, that is. Humphrey growled. All I'm suggesting is that we work together, Pickering said. You've tried to break the door down, but it won't budge, and my axe is in there, which means the only way in is through the window. So unless you want to continue sleeping on the hall floor, you're going to need my help getting in. Pickering sounded triumphant. If I get in and dispose of the boy, then we both do the deal with Lucretia Cutter. What do you say? There was a pause. Deal, Humphrey said reluctantly, as long as I get to make him into a pie. Virginia closed the cupboard door. Let's get out of here.